Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another Enable Bootcamp. Today is going to be getting more out of your S1 EDR solution with the Singularity Marketplace and more. If this is your first time joining a bootcamp or an office hours, I'm Lewis Pope, one of the head nerds at Enable. My focus is on security, very much the practical implementation and day-to-day of practical security controls, how you get things done in the trenches. So the first thing we're going to look at as an additional functionality is the Singularity Marketplace. If you just got into EDR, started deploying agents, and never looked back, there's a lot of extra functionality in here underneath the Singularity Marketplace. These are all free integrations, and that there's no charge for you to do the integration with the product. With EDR, there may be some charges in that other solution that you're doing the ingestion from. There will be implications on your data retention if you're getting a longer data retention than the default 14 days. But just coming in here and setting these up, there's no additional cost associated with them. And it's basically a case of, well, what do you want to ingest additional information from? There's the ability to ingest logs information so that you can make that information available to you in the EDR dashboard's threat hunting view, and I will show that later. But there's also the ability to come in here and add in add items in that will give you additional functionality inside of S1. And one of those, and I'm going to go ahead and just because it's an easy example, I'm going to look at VirusTotal, because this is an easy one for you to go test yourself and see how it behaves. Since VirusTotal does offer free user accounts and a free API key for you to kind of just test out with. So what this allows us to do is whenever we install this integration, it needs the API token. And I am just going to grab that real quick from my little instance of VirusTotal. I'm going to paste that in. And then we have the response action. So I've got this connection to VirusTotal now. What is it going to do for me? It allows me to first say, well, what do I want to have automated here? Do I want an automated response or not? So I'm going to say here that I want to have an automated response triggered for suspicious threats. Because let's think about the actual workflow. If you are a technician, an engineer, a help desk individual, and you go into S1 and you look at a detection and it says it's suspicious, well, you now have to start an entire workflow to figure out if this suspicious item is something you actually need to be worried about or not. But with this particular integration, you can have an automation that can make it a decision for you based on what VirusTotal's opinion on a particular detection is. So we can tell it that if, based on VirusTotal score, they will score something between -100 and 100, 100 being safe, -100 being known malicious, and we'll say anything above a score of 70, well, -70. And we want it to, if there's a suspicious detection and the VirusTotal score is greater than 170, then we want to take the kill, quarantine, and remediation action. Maybe we'll save the rollback as a manual action we will do later. But this is an example of a really simple, straightforward integration for your EDR so that whenever a suspicious detection is made, you can have some automated logic that can go ahead and process it for you instead of having to exclusively rely on an individual to come in and look at it and make a decision themselves. You can apply some forethought. There are a ton of other integrations as well in here. So for the Azure Active Directory, this will give us the ability to few details. What will this give us? Functionality. It will give you the ability to suspend a user, end a session, and force password reset. So whenever you are inside of S1, if you go through and integrate this, and you're inside of SentinelOne, and you look at an incident, and you make the decision that, hey, whatever this incident was, it's raised to the level that I want to, out of the abundance of caution, go ahead and force this user to reset their force this user to re-sign in, to be revoked out of their current sessions. That would be an option that would now be available to me here underneath this XDR action. So instead of a technician, an engineer having to go dig out their credentials for that Azure environment and then go log into that Azure environment and then push the command, however they're going to do that, which will take them more than a minute, maybe more than 2 minutes to do. This is a single button push, and it's taken care of. And each one of these integrations inside of here, again, they're all free, but it's up to you to look through them and see which ones are of value to you. Which ones do you need? Because there are a lot, but it's completely dependent upon your workflows, how you have things already aligned in your environment. This might be a redundancy for you. It might be a brand new capability. For anything that is a log ingestion item, that is going to feed into, and I am going to switch my views real quick. And if you have not had an opportunity to switch your view and poke around at some of the new options that are going to be coming up and the new workflows that are going to be coming up, change yourself to the enhanced view. Whenever you switch over to this, now whenever you go to the deep visibility section, it will take you to the new experience. And whenever you're over here in this new experience, this is where you're going to see not just the telemetry information that is being recorded by the EDR agents, but also any telemetry that you are bringing in from any of those other data sources, such as your M365 logs or anything else that you have chosen to integrate and ingest through the integrations. So I'm not going to spend too long in this section because this is going to require you to know and understand the logs that you are pulling and how to parse them. And that's going to be, it is a skills challenge, it is a learning challenge, but there's no way to get a short learning path on this. So you have to know how that platform operates, understand what the useful information is, what the baselines are, what the actual events that you are going to want to look for are. But this gives you a way to create those queries, have them in here, and make it easy to quickly search across all of this telemetry data to see if you get matches for what you're looking for. I am going to switch, though, back to the regular view, just so I can show off some more items that are probably going to be of interest of you to start using today. The next item we're going to go into is Ranger. So Ranger, if you have seen this, great. If not, a quick recap. Ranger and Rogue functionality was added to the S1 dashboards a few months ago. And you can see the status of is Rogue enabled or not for individual site by just going to settings, sites. We'll edit a site here, and you'll see that Ranger is just a radio box option down here to turn it on or off. Rogues will be on by default. Ranger will be something you have to turn on. Rogues does not carry an associated cost with it, and that's why it's just on by default for you. Ranger, however, does have a license cost associated with it. So if you're going to start turning it on, make sure you're aware of the implications of that. So the way this Ranger functionality works is you're going to you will first enable it for a site. Once it's enabled for a site, there'll be some options for you in here to configure. Do I want to enable Ranger scanning? Do I only want to scan on the local subnet, or do I want to discover, anything it can scan and get to? Do I want to auto-enable scan of discovered networks, or do I want it to be a manual process of whenever a new network is discovered, I've got to come in here and tell it, yes, you can scan it. And that's just know and understand based on if you have mobile employees that are taking laptops to different networks, you're probably not going to want to have this enabled on those devices where they're going out into other people's networks, because whoever owns that network will probably not look kindly upon you, look kindly upon that endpoint being added to the network and then all of a sudden aggressively scanning that network. So that'll probably result in that device being blocked in that environment if it's a managed network. So there's not a right or wrong answer here for what these options should be. You'll have to know the environment that those endpoints are going to be exposed to. The rest of the options down here are, what kind of scans do you want it to do? This is not just a simple ICMP or ping scan. It's using multiple different ways of trying to discover different devices on the network. And then deploy keys. This is going to be useful for you to add the domain credentials for the environment, because one of the nice things about Ranger is it does give you that list of, all right, here's everything we have discovered on the network. Is it secured or unsecured? Can it not be secured? Is there reviews for these devices or not? So have we went through and actually said these devices are allowed or not? The types of devices, OS types, fingerprinting for the device to give you IP address, MAC address, vendor, lots of useful fingerprinting information about these individual devices. But this is, while it's a lot of good information, where's the value here? This is just like any other network scan tool you've probably seen in the past 5 years. Where the real value in this is how it plugs in and joins with your workflows. So once this is turned on, you're able to tell it, hey, SentinelOne, I want you to send me email notifications on Ranger anytime a device is discovered. I also want it to alert me, say, whenever, we'll say also if devices or uh, fingerprint labels are modified. So, what that device says it is changes. Those are two things that I'm probably going to want to know about if it happens on a network that I manage. So now I will get an email whenever a new device is added to one of those. So that's going to be in here for us, and that'll just be a part of the Ranger list here. So now that I have this information of, all right, a new device has been added, let me go to the dashboard and review it. What does that workflow look like? So I'm going to come in here, find that device that was discovered. We'll just say it was this particular device here. And there's a couple of questions for me to ask. Do I know what this device is? Do I not know what it is? What network is it joined to? How sensitive is that network? How much do I panic now? And if you take a quick look at this and you're like, oh yeah, I know what this is. That's a new device. It should be enrolled in enrolled in SentinelOne. I can choose this deploy agent option right here, and it'll go ahead and use those domain credentials we supplied to push out and install SentinelOne to that device. Let's say this isn't a device that you know what it is. You don't really know what it is. You have no control over it, no real vision other than what's in the fingerprint information. I can then say, you know what, this is a slight panic moment. I don't really know if this is bad or not, but I definitely know nobody has approved it with me. So I'm going to isolate this device based on IP address. And this will allow me really quickly to come in here and add a rule to all of the other devices in that environment, in that network that have SentinelOne agents installed on them. Do not communicate with this potential rogue device. I don't know what it is and we can't trust it. I don't want you to trust it either. You put that in place, you've now successfully isolated this potential malicious rogue device from all of your other devices in the network. Typically, this would be something you would have to do by remoting, getting access to or remoting into or SSHing into a managed switch or a router or something else in the environment, and then creating some ACLs or some other rules to block communication in the environment. This makes it, and that's network engineer work. This gives you a way for your tier ones, your lower level techs and engineers to quickly make this type of decision and take this type of action until, well, they can figure it out of, yep, you know what this is. We know what this is now. It's going to be allowed. This was, new equipment purchase by client, was not notified of install, now enrolled in S1, and hit apply. There we go. I'll have that device review in there, and this gives me my authoritative, a record of truth. So if anything ever happens or anything ever goes sideways, I have the ability to come in here and say, yes, this device was added to your network on this date at this time. We reviewed it and we took these actions about it. And this is going to be an important process, an important capability that you need for a lot of specific compliances and standards. You have to be able to do this for high trust, for this cybersecurity framework. A lot of your cybersecurity insurance policies now require you to be able to have this type of capability to automatically be notified when new devices appear and have a process for dealing with those devices. So Ranger collects a lot of useful information for us, and that is going to be presented here in the view we have here. It's going to be giving us all the fingerprinting information. Ranger also can help enrich some of the data and the telemetry that you're searching through whenever you're doing threat hunting or incident response. But you can export out this information here as just raw CSV if I wanted to. And as far as reports go, so an actual a PDF, and here's kind of all the information Ranger spits out for you on the PDF, on the Excel or CSV export. So lots of good information. But if you save for a prettier report that you're going to hand off to a user, there is not a Ranger specific report in here for that. But we're going to move on to a new piece of functionality that does not always get taken advantage of. That is the application section. So if you are paying for a vulnerability assessment tool, and the only thing that vulnerability assessment tool is doing is checking to tell you if the applications you have installed on the endpoint have known vulnerabilities associated with them, here you go. You have a replacement for that now. That is exactly what this applications section, this applications management side of S1 does for you. It will populate this information based on the agents you have installed, and it'll report back in and say, hey, these are the applications that are installed on these devices, and here are the vulnerabilities that are associated with these discovered applications. So I can see in my environments that I'm looking at here, and let me just focus down on just one particular site. There we go. So I can see in this site, I've got 3 different versions of VLC Media Player that all have different known vulnerabilities with them. So we have, and we can see how many days it has been since they've been detected. We'll just click into one real quick, and this will show us that for VLC Media Player 3.0.4, it is installed on one computer. And here are all of the CVEs that are associated with that particular version of the software, along with the severity rating, so critical, high, medium, links out to the MITRE or the MVD database. So if you, a lot of times, one of the challenges is how do I communicate this information to my clients? How do I make it, pull meaning out of this? And while the CVS scores here are usually enough to say, hey, it's a critical rated score and it needs to be remediated, you can also use the MITRE link out here that will take you to more information about this particular vulnerability, what it may be, if you kind of have to explain a little bit more about it. Just makes it easier for you to find that information. All right, so now, and this is great because again, also you can export this out, but this also gets an associated report with it. So you can, on the applications insight, generate a report, and we are going to do this as a one-time report for the last 30 days. And we're going to create that real quick and let that run. Let's see how long that takes us to get that to pop up so we can review that. Because there are ways to use the automation inside of EDR, SentinelOne. However, this is, I don't want to say redundant, but this is usually stuff that this is a capability that you already have inside of Insight or N-central, the ability to run PowerShell scripts, VBS scripts, automation manager tasks. You've got all that available inside of Insight or N-central. But S1 EDR has that available as well in the dashboard. So if you need this capability, it is in here. And this is more often than not, I see this used as part of incident response. So if you start offering your services as IR and you go in, and a lot of people will go in and they will drop SentinelOne as one of their first mitigation efforts to keep any potential problems from going further, but also as a way to start collecting information about the environment. And they use the automation here in the script library to streamline that process for them. Deep visibility functionality of the product. So this is going to be a significant difference between whether you have a control license or a complete license. If you have a control license, everything I'm about to talk about has no use for you. Complete license is what you will need, and that's because with the complete license, you're recording all telemetry about what happens on an endpoint. If you only have control license, the S1 dashboard only records information about events that the local agent says was a threat or suspicious. But if you have a complete license, anything and everything that happens on the endpoint is recorded and made available. So that is going to allow you to query against that information. And just as a really simple example of this, I'm going to do source process name. There we go. And this is tab autocomplete equals, and we're going to say, I am looking for anywhere that Microsoft Edge ran in the last, last 48 hours. We'll run this query real quick. If I got the formatting of the query correct here, it'll start popping out a bunch of information for me about where it has seen this event. Apparently, Since I am, of course, I'm focused on some lab equipment, nobody's been running Edge. But I bring this up as an example because this is a really, really good way for you to say, hey, I need to look for certain source processes. I need to look and make sure that there aren't specific executables running in my environment doing other things, such as picking on an old tool that was used. This was and still is used by a lot of scammers and hackers, PC Anywhere. Replace this with any open source, free or free trial remote access tool, and chances are there is a threat actor group out there somewhere that is using that as their means to get clients, to get at people. So just as an example of that, let me grab one of my VMs here. So just an example, somebody, your end user gets the email or they get the phone call. I need to remote, I'm from such and such. I need to remote into your system to offer support, whatever it may be. Can you please go to whatever.com? And they'll get them to just navigate really quickly to wherever it is they want them to go to download whatever package, or maybe they send it to the link directly to them in email, whatever it is. This is a completely legitimate application. There's nothing bad about it in the sense that it's malicious itself. No, it is a perfectly legitimate application, and most security suites and applications are not going to block you from running a legitimate application unless you've gone through extra steps. So this is just to demonstrate here that this is, everybody should know and understand this is how easy it gets for an attacker to get into an environment. Send an email, make a phone call, convince an end user to click on something they shouldn't. So what we can do is we can start looking for that type of behavior, but we can also not only do it as a, I feel like looking today, we can do it as a, please always look for that for me type action through the custom star rules. So I'm able to say, this custom star rules, I want to add a new rule. And this rule is going to be PC Anywhere, just to pick on them. And this is going to be a critical event because me, myself, and my techs should never be using PC Anywhere. Change this to any other tool that use this for any other tool or application that you need to block based on behaviors of what it's doing or just the source names. Because you can blacklist based on hashes. That's nothing special. Almost every AV solution out there gives you a way to blacklist based on a hash. EDR can do that just as easily as well. That's actually what you're doing whenever you're adding to your making your mitigation decisions workflows. But here we're just going for, well, I can't block every version of PC Anywhere by hash value because one, well, how many different versions of it are out there, and am I really going to take the time to add all 300 or 200 different hashes of that particular executable that I can find? Not scalable, not efficient. So instead, this is where you use these types of rules to say, all right, if anything ever pops up and it's got PC Anywhere, and again, change this to whatever it is. You know what the technician tools that your local competition use. So if you start seeing those show up in an environment, that is a very clear indicator for you that you potentially have a churn scenario. It's easy to find a list of applications that are used by threat actors for these types of attacks. Go add them in here as well. And you'll be able to tell it that whenever you see this, I want you to treat it as a threat. Do I want you to mark it as suspicious? Or would I rather you mark it as malicious threat and take which action and even fire off the network quarantine option? So this is something that I wish I would have had a few years ago whenever I was with my MSP. If I would have had the capability of knowing immediately and taking action immediately that one of my clients has invited somebody into their environment to start poking around, and they install their software, they install their technical tool or whatever it may be. This gives you the capability of potentially catching that, stopping it dead in its tracks, and locking that device down on the network. So just imagine how that's going to play out whenever that competitor comes in, installs a piece of software, and immediately bricks a computer, basically. You got the opportunity to make the phone call first yourself because, well, you're getting the alerts about it, or you're going to have the ability to, whenever the client calls in and has to fess up that something went wrong with one of the computers, you can go and look and say exactly why it was locked down. Oh, because network quarantine was triggered because we saw this application running that is commonly used by threat actors and other individuals that should not be really poking around in your environment. We did what we were supposed to do. Sorry for the inconvenience, but let's talk about why it happened. And these queries in here for the deep visibility, these are, if you've ever written an SQL query, this is going to be kind of familiar for you. It is slightly different, but it's kind of feels the same still. And we're not going to say it's a blank, it's a blank canvas, go start working. There are actually some default ones already in here for you to learn and use. Some good example ones are, all right, so command runs with /C and LOL bin, so living off the land binaries for remote code execution. So if I click on this, that will populate the query for me and tell me, have I seen that happen anywhere? And if I really like this query, I can go add it to my star rules. Since we are, MSPs, for the most part, most of us are using PowerShell for automation or some type of function. But there are some times where if you see PowerShell in an environment, it might be worth getting your attention, such as there being an outbound PowerShell script that runs, a PowerShell script that runs and makes a connection to an external IP address. Here's an example of what that query looks like. And you would need to know, of course, how do you use PowerShell scripts, because if you are constantly making external connections with PowerShell to do automations, this is going to generate a lot of noise for you. But a clear-cut case for most MSPs that something bad is happening and it needs to be stopped is if there's any PowerShell running with base64 encoding in the command line. So this is a query that is going to say if the event is, a process creation and the target process path contains PowerShell, or the target process display name contains PowerShell, and the command line contains anything of this regular expression here. That would be a very good indicator that whatever that PowerShell script was running with base64 encoding, so it was obfuscated, which is a threat actor tactic. There is not many legitimate situations where you as an MSP are going to be running a PowerShell script with base64 encoding. This is, break glass in case of emergency type scenario if you see this happen most of the time. Very much one of the things you should probably have in your star rules. And if you are interested in more about the star rules, how to create them, how to write the queries, take advantage of the online help. There's a lot of raw documented information in there, but there's also the SentinelOne University that you should have access to. If you don't have access to that, reach out to your PSM and find out if that is available for you. But This is probably the most underused, but most valuable part of S1. This is your threat hunting dashboard for what is happening on your endpoints. And of course, if you don't have the time or skills, I don't say time or skills, but if you are facing the challenge of staffing demands, or you don't have people on your team that have the bandwidth to learn this new query language, or to spend time in here, or just the simple fact of you don't have 24/7 staffing, but you want those types of capabilities, we do have options there. One is the Vigilance Offering, which will be a 24/7 service offered by SentinelOne directly, which will perform the initial triage, investigation, and remediation of incidents as they appear. So instead of someone on your team having to come into the dashboard whenever a threat happens, look at that threat, understand that threat, write the documentation, take the notes about it, and decide what should be done, you can offload that to the S1 Vigilance team as a service. And benefits multiple, but mainly it's just giving you that ability to do 24/7 and do honest to goodness manage 24/7 EDR without it requiring you to stand up your own staff to do it 24/7. If that's not enough and you decide that you need even more, you need the threat hunting. You don't just need what's happening on the endpoints. You also need what's happening on your firewalls, on your managed switches, on what's happening out in your cloud, maybe over on your M365 tenancy or over at AWS. If you need security and vision and alerting and remediation into that as well, then the Enable MDR service we're starting to offer might be a better fit for you there. Another 24/7 fully managed offering where you just come in and consume the service, enroll the devices, and offload the work to our Enable MDR team to handle. A few things in here. So yes, there is blacklisting, and it's straight up just a block list. And this allows you to add based on, we'll go Windows, and it's just a hash value block. So you can't block based on a process name here. If you want to block on a process name, then it's going to be star rules. If you want to block based on the hash of a file, you'll do it here via the block list. Also, since we're looking at the block list and exclusions are right next to it, make sure that whenever you are creating exclusions, I'm just going to show this off real quick because it's something that a lot of people miss until somebody shows it to them. There's this more options drop down here. And whenever you're adding exclusions, especially a path-based exclusion, don't automatically choose this performance focus extended option down here, because this is telling the S1 agent, ignore what's happening in this location. And you don't want to do that if you don't have to. You don't want to open up your holes in your defenses any larger than they need to be. So instead of that, choose the interoperability option first, test, see if the application behaves correctly. If it doesn't, move up one layer and move up one level at a time until the application you're having issues with starts working like it's supposed to. And again, this is so you're not opening the defenses, opening up holes in your fences larger than what they really need to be. Also, device control down here, since this is another overlooked item. If you want to take advantage of this, this allows you to institute part of your data loss prevention processes and strategies. So we're able to say for USB devices, we're going to block anything that is the class of mass storage devices. So here in just a few clicks, I now have a rule for any device that has S1 on it that's going to block it from mounting any old random USB flash drive or hard drive that somebody plugs in. And then I'll be able to add another rule that's going to allow for a specific, maybe a specific type of USB device, or maybe a specific USB device, which is this more secure way. I can say, yep, we're going to allow USB devices based on the serial ID for mass storage. So if a mass storage device gets plugged in and it has this serial number on it, it can be mounted and read and written from. That way you can institute that security control, but there's still that pre-approved list of a handful of USB keys or hard drives that can be used in the environment. Good use case for that is your CPAs or your tax offices. A lot of times clients bring in and deliver their information on their own USB devices. Well, that in of itself is a giant security challenge, because, well, what if the computers that they use are compromised, or the USB key that they purchased was already a booby-trapped USB key? But however it happens, you now have, as a CPA in your hand, given to you by one of your clients, a flash drive with malware on it that you're going to plug in. Well, we can always do secure staging. So where now, all right, yeah, sure. When those clients bring in those USB keys, those are plugged into this front computer that doesn't have any of the tax software or any other meaningful connections to it. It just has the ability to copy the file from the USB key to a network share, and that's it. And all the other devices in the network have the USB key, USB flash drive mounting shut off. Is that a little annoying? Does that add some complications to somebody's day? It does, but it's a great way of kind of securing an environment, or at least it's one way of securing an environment. We can also add rules for Bluetooth devices. So maybe we've got an environment where they're very much worried about adhering to specific standards and reducing their risk exposure. So they decide that any type of Bluetooth device that is running a version of Bluetooth older than 4.2 can't be used. Really quickly and easy. Now, this all said, as easy as this is to enable, it's also that easy to really ruin your client's day. So don't come in here and start enabling anything for the device controls until you've had a conversation with your clients and you got a good handle on their environment. Because if you set up that the Bluetooth rule, you're going to all of a sudden get a bunch of emails and help desk tickets about how all of a sudden a bunch of mice and keyboards and ears and headsets stopped working all of a sudden. One of the final things I want to touch on, because this is a common question or challenge, is how do I demonstrate functionality to a client? There's always well, I got to prove it to a client. I got to show them that what I'm selling them does what I tell them that it's going to do. So just as an option for a way you can do this, you can always just go out to YouTube or some of the collateral that we have, grab some of the recorded videos and show that. But sometimes, they want to see something really happening in real time. So for that purpose, I tend to take and just stand up a VM somewhere. It's a disposable VM, nothing important on it. If anything happens to it, I can wipe it. It's running on a Hyper-V host that doesn't have any other sensitive computers or anything else running on it. It's simply purely a lab environment, and it's not on my production network. And what I will do is I will take that VM, install SentinelOne on it, and put it in a site and a group that has the policy set to detect only. So this computer is in the site detect only, which means SentinelOne will not take any actions against things that it finds or sees on the endpoint. So that's step one. Now, here we go. Here is that VM, and I'm going to go to Malware Bazaar. If you are not familiar with Malware Bazaar, it is one of many. I use it because it's relatively simple to search and free. But this is a malware repository for security research. These are not neutered malware samples. These are live pieces of malware. So treat them like a loaded gun. Utmost respect. Don't mess around with these. Don't visit this page on your work computer. Don't download anything on a production computer. Only touch this from a VM that is safely secured, locked away from the rest of your environments, because it will be a bad day if you ever download one of these things and actually run it in your production environments. But I'm going to just grab here. So yeah, trick bot. Yeah, so I'm just going to come in here and find one of these that sounds interesting. So there is TrickBot. We're going to download it. There it is. I'm going to open that up. And this is in a zipped folder, so it protects in transit. But there we go. It now sees that that malicious file is on the system. I am now going to detonate that payload just by double clicking to run it. And there we go. It now sees that that malicious file is executed. And now if I switch back over to the SentinelOne dashboard, I'll see that my status on that device is turned red in just a matter of seconds. I can go to incidents section, and I can see here's my events starting to pile up. If I click on it, of course, I'll see all the relative information about the threat, what's happening, the endpoint, the user, the hash for it, if I want to go search the hash for it. But this gives you that example of being able to detonate a live payload, show what's happening, show the timeline for it, and show the client that, yeah, not all I have to do, but show them that, yeah, we're going to go through, we're going to research it, we're going to say that, yeah, this is a true positive event. We're going to mark it that we're currently in progress trying to deal with it, so everybody else knows on the team that we're dealing with it. Make the judgment call, apply whatever workflows or logic you need to apply, and then say, yep, we want to kill, quarantine, and mitigate this threat. We're going to mark it as resolved and hit apply, and then it takes care of it for us. And you're able to show it in real time how it's actually taking these actions. If I switch back over to the VM, we should start seeing popping up from the Sentinel agent over here. We'll start seeing it addressing and remediating these threats, going from not mitigated to mitigated. And we'll see, we get this pop up, the security team in your org resolve the security incident. So you're getting that constant feedback to the client. So you're able to show them that, you know, as we're doing these things, you're getting immediate feedback. So it helps deal with those, well, we don't see what you do, we never hear from you, what are you really doing for us kind of situations. But it's useful to have a workflow for this. It's kind of one of those proof is in the pudding type things. And it works out really well to kind of prove the value of the service that you're going to offer to a client. Okay, so for the notifications for Ranger, if you do decide you want to take advantage of Ranger and use it, make sure you're enabling the notifications for Ranger and that you're getting the appropriate email notifications out of here that you want. If you want to get the notifications via API, you would have to open up and use the API that's available for S1. But this would allow you to either get a syslog out for it, or just get the email alert that can go into your PSA and alert you, so you know that you need to go take a look. And for the star custom rules, there is a limit on those. There is a limit of 400, I believe, is the default limit. just as an example of, again, some of those that are in here. Let's look for, there's a good example in here of one. Is this the right one? Let's take a quick look. No, that's not the right one. Let's see another one. Admin log. Here we go. Admin logins. So if we really wanted to, this is a good example of an admin login. So if endpoint name exists, so it's an endpoint, and the login username equals whatever admin you want to look for. So this is a little bit of a canary token type or a honeypot type thing. You can create a user or an admin user in an environment. Give them, you might put them in the admin group, but you may manually rescind a lot of their individual permissions. That way, if an attacker gains into your environment and they somehow start poking around and they get a hold of these particular credentials, you can get the alerts for it. You can even have this to be, your particular. I know a lot of MSPs like to use their set up their own local admin account on devices. Well, you've got that local user account on a device. Nothing's going to protect you. Well, nothing outside of proper BitLocker or drive encryption is going to absolutely protect that system from a physical attack. Somebody physically getting a hold of it and using something like the WinUtil or another method to bypass a local admin password. You need to know if somebody ever uses your local admin account that you create on your clients' machines, because you don't want to be on the other side of an incident and the IR team comes out and says, yep, one of the steps of the kill chain and the steps of the threat actor was they got access to the environment and they were able to use the local admin account of MSP admin with a set of compromised credentials or an LTLM hash to get to the rest of the network. So if you're creating local accounts as part of your processes, you would definitely want to come in here and add whatever that MSP admin user account may be. And this is kind of a how creative do you want to be? Because there are 1,000,001 different ways that you can come in here and create rules, create the queries. What are you worried about? What do you don't worry about? And this is one of those, you have to know your environments. You have to understand the threats that those environments face so that you can tailor what you're looking for. So it can be meaningful alerts and meaningful actions whenever they're taken.